Everyone, and welcome to the lineup. Today is September the 2nd, 2021. I'm Barry Stagner, looking forward to our time together tonight. Just a little bit of a heads up for those of you who may be interested. Next weekend, that is Friday, September 10th and Saturday, September 11th, I will be part of, with Amir Sarfati, Pastor Jack Hibbs, and the wonderful Jan Markell, the Behold He Comes Prophecy Conference out of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills. Now, the conference is full both days. All the registrations are booked, but you can join us online. And if you go to beholdhecomes.org, you can purchase for $5 an on-stream or a live stream pass. Now, let me just say this. I see this always pops up when somebody, charges a little fee for live streaming. Live streaming is not free. It costs the church a bunch of money to have enough bandwidth to broadcast something like this. And I think if we can pay, $5 for a cup of coffee, I think it's money well spent to throw a $5 at live streaming and have a full day, including 2 hours of exclusive interview access that the people in person aren't going to have. So Jan and I are going to sit down and talk for an hour, and Jack and Amir are going to sit down and talk for an hour. And that's going to be played over the 2-hour lunch break. So I know you'll be encouraged by that. So again, you can go to beholdhecomes.org and purchase a live stream pass there. And really, really looking forward to the event. There's going to be some 14,000 people over the 2 days in person. There's well over 20,000 people who have registered for live streaming. And I think there's somewhere around 60 churches that are hosting watch events. So it's going to be a big day, 2 days, I should say. That's next Friday, September 10th, and next Saturday, September 11th. And Pastor Jack has put together a 9/11 memorial video for the 20th anniversary of the events that took place and shook our nation on September 11th, 2001. And I think you'll be encouraged by that and reminded as well. Now, we often jump in and excuse me, we have comments made about, how many times the stories are negative, and we live in negative times. That's why Paul said they're perilous in the last days, and he made that direct association. We talk about things that are ugly that are going on in the world. So let's kind of flip the script a little bit, at least for our opening portion, talk about some good things. And I want to underscore a point after we get through with our first couple of stories, or three. And the first comes from Sight Magazine. It's all over the media, but this particular article came from a magazine called Sight. And that's S-I-G-H-T if you want to look it up. And oh, by the way, I meant to mention this. I've had several people say, can you post the links? Every story I give the name of the place where the order or where the story came from. So you can look those up, and including this one. So with that said, the headline reads, California and LA County both to pay $400,000 settlement to John MacArthur's church. The Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors on Tuesday voted to authorize a $400,000 payment to settle a legal battle with Grace Community Church over lead pastor John MacArthur's defiance of COVID-19 restrictions in the early months of the pandemic. Under the agreement, which the board unanimously approved without discussion, the state of California will also pay the church $400,000. This agreement, county officials said, was reached in the context of the U.S. Supreme Court's decision in February that told California it could not enforce a ban on indoor worship because of the coronavirus pandemic. LA County modified its health order and lifted the indoor worship ban after the ruling. After the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that some, public health safety measures could not apply to houses of worship. Resolving this litigation is a responsible and appropriate thing to do, read a statement from county officials. From the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, Los Angeles County has been committed to protecting the health and safety of its residents, and we are grateful to the county's faith organizations for their continued partnership to keep their congregants and the entire community safe and protected from COVID-19. And the decision also comes just days after MacArthur, during a Sunday sermon, confirmed that he and his wife had also contracted COVID-19 last winter. MacArthur also said many people contracted the virus, adding that it probably went through our church in maybe December or January. Patricia and I enjoyed our own bout with COVID for about a week and a half, said MacArthur, who was absent from the pulpit in late December. MacArthur also said the settlement money would go to the Thomas More Society, which represented the church in this court case. Nothing will come to us except the affirmation that the Lord preserved and protected us through this, MacArthur said. Our next story is also a positive story. It comes from the Christian Headlines, and it says Virginia Supreme Court sides with Christian teacher in transgender policy dispute. On Monday, the Virginia Supreme Court sided with a Christian teacher in his attempt to stay employed at his school after he was suspended for speaking out against a proposed LGBT policy. The state high court upheld a lower court decision that had ordered Loudoun County Public Schools to reinstate Leesburg Elementary School physical education teacher Tanner Cross, who had attended a May school board meeting and spoke out against the proposal, saying it would, quote, damage children, end quote. The proposal, which passed, requires staff to use the name and pronouns that a student prefers, even if it differs from their birth certificate and biological sex. It also allows students to use restrooms and locker rooms and play on sports teams that match their gender identity. We believe Cross has a strong claim to the view that his public dissent implicates fundamental societal values deeply embedded in our constitutional republic, the Virginia Supreme Court ruled in a 14-page decision. Cross was opposing a policy that might burden his freedoms of expression and religion by requiring him to speak and interact with students in a way that affirms gender transition, a concept he rejects for secular and spiritual reasons, the state high court said. Under such circumstances, Cross' interest in making his public comments was compelling, the high court ruled, and the Alliance Defending Freedom, or the ADF, which is representing Cross, asserted that the school had violated his religious liberty, and Cross was suspended after telling the board meeting in May, "I'm a teacher, but I serve God first. I will not affirm that a biological boy can be a girl and vice versa because it is against my religion. It's lying to a child. It's abuse to a child." And the ADF obviously applauded the court's decision. Now, I feel like saying, but wait, there's more. There's more good news here. This comes from the Christian Headlines, and the article says, its headline that is, Texas law banning 85% of abortions takes effect. It's time to build a culture of life. And the nation's most restrictive abortion law went into effect Wednesday morning, that's yesterday, when a Texas law prohibiting an abortion if a fetal heartbeat is detected took effect without Supreme Court action. Although the high court could still act at any moment in blocking the law, the pro-life groups were celebrating what they considered a milestone in the decades-long legal and political battle against abortion on demand. Texas is now the first state ever to enforce a heartbeat law, said Texas Right to Life in a statement. The new Texas heartbeat law will save the lives of an average of 150 children each day. Yet there are hundreds of accounts on Twitter, including many journalists attacking the law. And the article says, imagine being upset about the fact that 150 children get to live another day. How heartless can you be? No child, and this is graphic, hang on, no child should have their skull crushed and be ripped into pieces in an abortion. No mother should have her baby torn from her womb. No father should be stripped of his right to protect his baby. It's time to build a culture of life in America and end abortion. And we stand with Texas. Abortion clinics, which are asking the Supreme Court to block the law, said it prohibits 85% of abortions in the state. A fetal heartbeat is typically detected at around 6 weeks of pregnancy. And this was signed into law by Texas Governor Greg Abbott. And he also requires doctors to conduct a test for that fetal heartbeat. And if one is detected, then the doctor is prohibited from performing an abortion. It allows exceptions for medical emergencies. And leading up to Wednesday, Planned Parenthood clinics were not scheduling appointments for abortions after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Now, one more story here, and I thought we had 3, but we have 4 in the good news category, and this one comes from LifeSite News. New York federal court upholds pro-lifers' First Amendment right to pray and protest outside abortion facilities. The 3-judge panel issued a unanimous opinion favoring 13 pro-life activists who were sued by the Attorney General for protesting and praying outside a New York abortion facility. Reversing its previous opinion, the U.S. Second Circuit Court of Appeals in New York sided with 13 Christian pro-life activists, affirming their right to pray, give counsel, and share the gospel with pregnant moms in front of a Queens, New York abortion center. The unanimous decision from a 3-judge panel affirmed the decision of a district court, which had issued an opinion favorable to the pro-lifers in 2018. This is a great victory, said Matt Staver, founder and chairman of the Liberty Council, a Florida-based legal organization which represented one of the defendants in the case. Now, here's why I thought it important to maybe pause for a moment. And these are great victories, but they're victories to people who stood up. They're not victories for people who sat and watched the river flow by, so to speak, but who went against the tide, the flow of popular opinion in our day and cultural acceptability and things of that nature. And they use the system to protect their constitutional rights. You know, a lot of times it seems as though Christians have a problem doing this. And the Bible does talk about taking one another to court, but that is exclusively dealing with Christian to Christian disputes. And we don't take our matters before the world to settle them. But when the world is attacking us, we use their system for our betterment and for our favor. We have to remember, Paul did this. Paul had been bound as a Roman citizen, the book of Acts tells us, and that was illegal. It was against the law for any Roman citizen to be bound for the purpose of flogging. And he was bound, and he was also being prepared to be beaten. And he said, is it lawful for you to beat a Roman citizen? And the person who was sending him to have the stripes put upon his back said, I didn't know you were a Roman citizen. And Paul said, and he went on to say, you know, with a great sum, I purchased my citizenship. And Paul said, hold the phone here. I was born, he didn't really say hold the phone, but he said, hang on, I was actually born a citizen. And he appealed to Caesar. He used the system to his advantage. And we need to do the same thing. We can't just sit by and let the bullies bully us. There's a very loud and proud group that now has Pride Month. I mean, we get some recognition. Think about what's happening here in our country. Think about what's happening around the world. The day the King of Kings and Lord of Lords entered into the world is celebrated for one day. And that one day has, in recent years, been heavily restricted. Public places can't put out a nativity scene. In our schools, there's no longer songs about Jesus. There's songs about Santa and snowmen and reindeer and all these other things, but nothing about Jesus in public schools. And then also we have Easter. And when I grew up here in the state of California, every year we had Easter break. Well, there's no Easter break anymore. Now it's spring break, and anything regarding the greatest event in human history that has happened so far, which was the resurrection and defeat of death by our Lord Jesus Christ, is being minimized. Yet something that, first of all, God hates pride. And secondly, he said that there are certain sexual associations and activities that are an abomination to him, and yet they're celebrated for an entire month. And listen, they fight for their rights. We need to fight for ours. They use the system to gain advantage for their causes. We need to use the system to gain advantage for ours. Well, I don't know if I want to have the hassle and all that stuff. And listen, I think especially in light of the abortion issue and what we've seen from these two stories regarding what's going on in Texas and what happened in New York. We need to stand up. These are unborn children. It's not fetal tissue. And by the way, fetus is just a Latin word for baby. And it's everybody understands it's a human life on the inside. And it's only in a delusional season of history that it can be just a blob of tissue or fetal tissue, as they like to call it. That's a baby inside of a mother's womb, and a 5-year-old can recognize that. And why so many people of higher levels of understanding and learning can't figure that out is beyond me. It has to be demonic. So stand up. Don't just put up with the things that are happening in our country. We need to stand up. We need to stand up against things that are not right. Jesus did the same thing. He came to the temple grounds. He went to the court of the Gentiles. He saw that there were money traders there and selling of doves and other sacrificial offerings at exorbitant prices. And we saw that, regular currency was being exchanged for a special temple currency, which was basically extorting money from the peoples who wanted to come and offer a sacrifice unto the Lord for their sins. Jesus said, hey, you're not going to do that here. This is my Father's house. You've made it into a den of thieves. He overturned the tables. He took action. We need to take action because there are positive results that do happen, even in the midst of trying to work our way through a system that is largely stacked against us. God is still on the throne, and good things do happen in these last days, and we just read 4 stories that prove it to be so. MacArthur's church stood up and said Hebrews 10:25 says assemble and not to forsake it. Didn't say anything about unless there's a pandemic, and they kept assembling. Sure, people got sick, and, we're not denying that COVID isn't real and that it hasn't cost lives and all the things like we've said before. But listen, we're the people of God, and we need to stand up like the people of God, and He's on our side. And if He's for us, who can be against us? We got to remember 1 John 4:4, greater is He who is in us than he who is in the world. And I heard one pastor paraphrase this as, greater is He who is in us than he who is after us. And He's after us for sure. But the Spirit of Almighty God that dwells in us will give us the courage, the boldness to stand and fight for what is right for our country or wherever you may be watching this from. Now, back to the mainstream news as it pertains to Bible prophecy. Israel 365 News says Iran has taken over the Syrian Golan and is now at Israel's border, top Middle East expert says. Veteran journalist and Middle East analyst Ehud Yari recently came out with a disturbing statement that across the northern border, the Iranian, which is the direction the Ezekiel invasion is going to take place from, is becoming firmly entrenched in the Syrian Golan. Yari noted that for the last 2 months, these combined forces besieged the city of Daraa, occasionally shelling the city. Inside the city are rebel groups who refuse to surrender. The Syrian army intends to exile the rebels to the Turkish-controlled region to the north, and Russian attempts at mediation have failed. Daraa holds particular significance as it was the scene of the first protest against the Assad regime in 2011. The tense situation threatens to explode at any moment, and another Syrian army bombardment of Daraa, I'm not sure if that's Daraa or Daraa, on Sunday killed 6 rebels. The Syrian army declined to comment on the reports, but said in a statement it was losing patience with what it called armed groups and terrorists in the neighborhood. Syria loomed as a belligerent threat to Israel until its civil war began a decade ago, but Yari claims that even in its weakened state, it is still a threat to Israel, and it would be reluctant to aggravate. Now, Jordan has expressed a willingness to renew ties with Syria. The powerful Iranian Hezbollah threat on its border is unappealing to King Abdullah. According to Yari, he claimed that Syria's Army's 4th and 7th divisions are now essentially controlled by Iran and Hezbollah, further amplifying the threat to Jordan. So we know that the Middle East is going to be a hotbed in the last days, things spiraling down and funneling down, if you will, to where it's going to end up being the whole world is against Israel, as Zechariah 12:3 tells us, and we are headed there. And one of these times, and again, I mention this regularly on the program, and rightfully so, there are things that move forward and then things pause for a while, and then suddenly all of a sudden something major seems to happen. And this, with this presence on the Golan, the Israeli border, that's a military presence of a sworn enemy of Israel in close proximity. And, who knows what's behind that? What else could be stacking up behind that? So we'll just wait and see on that. But it does remind us there is an attack from the north that the Bible has prophesied with nations like Turkey and the Iranians. And interesting that Syria is not named in that. And now I think we can see why, because they're such a mess. But also you've got Russia as well as Libya and Sudan involved in this invasion. Now, here's a follow-up story to why maybe what we just read is happening. And it comes from the Times of Israel. The headline reads, Taliban revels in U.S. defeat, says withdrawal, a big lesson for other invaders. Now, we've read other stories in past weeks about how this event that took place in Afghanistan and the overtaking of Kabul has emboldened other terrorist groups. And it could be that that's part of the reason why there's this military push on the Golan, the northern border of Israel, and other things that are very likely to happen in coming days. The Taliban held full control of Kabul's international airport on Tuesday after the last U.S. plane left its runway, marking the end of America's longest war and leaving behind a now quiet airfield and Afghans outside it still hoping to flee the insurgents' rule. Vehicles raced back and forth along the Hamid Karzai International Airport's sole runway on the northern military side of the airfield. Before dawn broke, heavily armed Taliban fighters walked through the hangars on the military side, passing some of the 7 CH-46 helicopters the U.S. State Department used in its evacuations before rendering them unflyable. Taliban leaders later symbolically walked across the runway, marking their victory. Congratulations to Afghanistan. This victory belongs to us all, Taliban spokesman Mujahideen told reporters from the runway of the airport. The defeat of America was a big lesson for other invaders and for our future generation. Mujahideen said a number of hours after the last foreign troops departed from Afghanistan. He said, it is also a lesson for the world, but he added that the Taliban wants to have good relations with the U.S. and the world. We welcome good diplomatic relations with them all. And that's why they're burning girls' schools and killing people with Christian Bible apps on their phone and things of that nature that we've been talking about over the last few weeks. And after 20 years, he went on to say, we have defeated the Americans. Now, it's interesting that we see this kind of language coming out of there because there's been a shift in thinking, global thinking in the past few decades. And that is that, you're not supposed to win a war anymore. We see this all the time with Israel being attacked by the Palestinians on the Gaza. And what's the media do? They compare casualties, or they compare dollar losses. They compare all these things as though it's not fair for somebody to win. It has to be equal on both sides when there's a skirmish. Now here, we just came out of a generation, the greatest generation, where World War II was decisively won and the enemies were decisively defeated and shut down. And there's nothing that's happened along those same lines by those same groups since. What happens here in Afghanistan? We're there for 20 years. We lost precious American lives, precious Afghani lives were lost as well. Some of the Taliban obviously were killed. But what happens? Days after we announce that we're leaving, they take over again. After 20 years, the 20-year time where American forces were in Afghanistan were for the express purpose of driving out the Taliban and protecting the Afghani people. Yet here they are, literally less than a week after this begins to happen. They're back in control of the country, and they're right back to square one where they were 20 years ago. It just doesn't make sense. When you put people in harm's way, you go there to win. You don't go there just for the sake of having a presence there, or a physical intimidation factor. You go there to defeat the enemy. And of course, war is ugly, and nobody loves war, and saying things like this doesn't make anybody a warmonger. We have to remember that The Bible presents our God as a God of war. He defeats his enemies. And listen, what did the American soldiers, the men and women who spent months and years away from home, and those who gave the ultimate or paid the ultimate price, what were their lives sacrificed for? What about these 13 that were just killed, American soldiers that were just killed, and Navy seamen as well, that were just killed through this terrorist act at the airport there? What was the reason for that great loss of life? Why weren't we there to defeat the enemy? Because it's the enemy, in this case ISIS, that caused this to happen. So just a bizarre mentality in our world today, and it's all part of that egalitarian thinking. Egalitarian just meaning everything has to be equal, and that's what's being promoted through these efforts to socialize America. Everybody has to make the same thing, have the same thing. That's the only thing that's fair. Well, I always find it interesting that heaven doesn't operate that way. There's angels that are mightier in power, and there's one who sits on the throne that is mightiest of all. There are archangels, there are other cherubim and seraphim. There are different types and ranks of angels. So listen, everything doesn't have to be equal for it to be heaven or the utopia that so many are looking for. The heart of the problem is the heart of man, and the heart of man is the heart of the problem, I think, is how the adage goes. Now, Times of Israel is also reporting that Biden defends decision to end the forever war. Now listen to this. Talk about delusional. He calls the exit an extraordinary success. President Joe Biden made a forceful defense Tuesday of his, quote, wise decision, end quote, to leave Afghanistan, telling Americans he refuses to send another generation to fight in a forever war. Well, they're forever wars because we don't fight to win anymore. The traumatic departure from Afghanistan, completed Monday after 20 years of war against the Taliban, was a wise decision and the best decision for America, Biden said in an address to the nation. After coming under fire from Republican opponents over the chaotic nature of the rush to the exits in Afghanistan, Biden said what he did, what should have been done years ago. I was not going to extend this forever war. I was not extending a forever exit, he said. The evacuation, he said, was an extraordinary success. Yeah, that's why there are people hanging out at the airport, jumping on the plane and climbing up into the wheel wells to try and get out of there. It was so successful. And speaking in an ornate state dining room of the White House, Biden thumped the lectern as he detailed the extraordinary costs of war, more than 2,400 U.S. military deaths and up to $2.3 trillion spent. That ended with the Taliban guerrillas back in power. I take responsibility, he said, for that decision. I made a commitment to the American people that I would end this war, and today I honored that commitment. It was time to be honest, he said. Amazing. The Associated French Press is saying, and I remember what we read about disabled helicopters, though they were a different category of helicopters, so that could be accurate. But the Associated French Press is saying, taking Black Hawk on a victory flight, the Taliban parade plundered U.S. hardware. A Black Hawk helicopter flew circles over the Taliban's spiritual heartland in southern Afghanistan Wednesday, while fighters below stood aboard captured Humvees as the Islamists paraded their plundered U.S. military hardware. The Taliban's victory lap celebrated the final withdrawal of U.S. troops, follows the group's astonishing 2-week takeover that capped a simmering 20-year insurgency. On the highway towards Afghanistan's second biggest city of Kandahar, a long line of green armored fighter vehicles drove in single file, most with white and black Taliban flags attached to the aerials. Fighters manned the controls of multi-purpose trucks used by the U.S., NATO, and Afghan forces during the 2-decade war, while others clamored over the vehicles at Anyo Maina, a town on the outskirts of the city. Among the light weapons were cradled by the militants were American M16 rifles. At least one Black Hawk helicopter buzzed overhead, suggesting someone from the former Afghan army was at the controls as the Taliban lacked qualified pilots. Our common enemy who vowed to bring economic prosperity to our land failed to do so, a Taliban recruiter named Saqib said. They claim to bring a civilized system. Go and take a look at the airport where all the planes are left in the middle. America did not just attack our young military men. America has corrupted our media It took away our culture. It has trampled our economy. And the Taliban's secretive supreme leader, Khuzada, is living in Kandahar, the group said on Sunday, after years in the shadows. A word spread that he would make an appearance Wednesday, but he didn't show up, leaving the city's new governor to address the crowd. So, again, there's the heart of the Taliban. America changed everything. We're going to change it back. They corrupted our media. We're going to control it, which is what tyrannical governments and corrupt rulers always do. They took away our culture. In other words, they let women go to school and they let them participate in official positions. All that's going to change. They destroyed our economy. And one of the main products that comes out of Afghanistan is heroin. And there's been a lot of talk about them increasing their market share in that illegal market. Now, the Epoch Times says up to 30 California students stuck in Afghanistan after the U.S. pullout, according to officials. Up to 30 school children from California are stuck in Afghanistan after U.S. troops pulled out of the country, school district officials confirmed to the Epoch Times. 27 students from 19 families who go to school in the San Juan Unified School District, which is the district my grandkids go to, are in Afghanistan, a spokeswoman for the district said in an email on Wednesday. These numbers continue to change rapidly, but we believe that some of these families may be in transit out of Afghanistan, but we've not been able to reach any of them in the last few days. The students and their families were in Afghanistan for personal reasons, such as visiting family members. Officials in both districts are working to get the kids home. The Cajon Valley Union School District also had some kids there who went on a summer trip to visit relatives. And both districts are working to get their kids home safely from Afghanistan, which is controlled by the Taliban terrorist group. Now, I saw a little clip on social media where there were 21 different times where Biden said, we're not going to leave one American behind. No American will be left behind. We're taking all the Americans out of the country. And now here you've got 30 primary school age kids and older who are in Afghanistan. What a terrifying, life-altering event this is going to be for them, to be running for your life or hiding, scared to death, afraid that you're going to be found. And who knows what's going to happen. We know that there's already been torture and executions of those who aided the Americans, and Americans certainly would be a target for such things should they be found. So we need to be praying for these families to get their kids out of there and home safe, and all Americans and all who want to leave as well. Israel 365 News also says 3 lawmakers sound alarm. Israel is in danger of turning into a Gentile state. And in the past few weeks, several Knesset members have voiced concerns that, given current developments, the future of Israel is decidedly un-Jewish. One rebel rabbi has a different vision and a solution for ensuring the Jewish future of Israel. The High Court on Sunday ruled to extend the law of return. Currently, the law grants citizenship to any person whose father or grandfather is Jewish. That includes people who are not classified as Jewish by the halakha or the Torah law. The new ruling extends to this to include widows and widowers of those whose father or grandfather was Jewish. The law of return, passed in 1950, gives the Jews the right to come and live in Israel and to gain Israeli citizenship. In 1970, the right of entry and settlement was extended to people with one Jewish grandparent and a person who is married to a Jew, whether or not they're Jewish under Orthodox interpretations. It is important to note that hundreds of thousands of people have made Aliyah to Israel as family members of Jews, despite not being considered Jewish by the law of return, but were eligible for Aliyah as a family member of a Jew. Now, this in the Knesset was approached from this perspective. It will be a nation entirely of non-Jews, Kari said. The High Court is eroding the foundations of the Jewish state. This is Shlomo Kari, who is a member of the Knesset, and through intentional interpretation distorts the law so that they, the High Court, will serve the wishes of its progressive judges. If we don't put an end to this, the High Court will put an end to the Jewish state. I will lead the Knesset to make a change in law to build a wall in such a way that even the activist and anti-Zionist High Court will not be able to break through. The High Court today ruled another precedent-setting and dangerous ruling that will destroy the law of return. Ben Gvir said, violations in the law may in the future cause the Jewish people to become a minority in their own country. In the next session, I will propose to amend the High Court ruling and include explicit sections in the law that will prevent the continuation on this slippery slope. Now, this points out something I think that's important, and I make no bones about it. I think the biblical implications of much of what we're seeing today tell us that the rapture of the church is at hand, which precedes the Great Tribulation. So we are seeing pre-tribulation type events warming up, so to speak. And this type of mentality, I think, is important to point out, because the evidence seems to state that between the two beasts of Revelation 13, that the Antichrist is going to be a Gentile. And if you've got, a Jewish state that's more welcoming to Gentiles and Gentile thinking and all that, this matter of concern here by these rabbis is valid in that sense. So, but it does tell us about the state of the thought process that many of the Israelis are in, including many of the Jewish Israelis. It's largely a secular country, and by a huge margin, I would add. And, recognizing that this type of thinking is going on is equivalent to the rest of the world. We're in a situation now here in the United States where people are being told, and many of our political people and parties are endorsing this, that everybody has the right to come to America. There shouldn't be any criteria for entering into the country like the old days with Ellis Island and how families worked and scraped to get their families over here. We should just have open borders, and everybody should have what we have here who are fortunate enough to be in this country and to be born here. And I don't think anybody who wants to see a strong immigration policy is saying we don't want any immigrants here. That's what we're all about. This country is a melting pot. That's what we've been known as, and we ought to continue in that. But I think it was put well by one person I saw who made mention, building a wall is not to keep people out. Building a wall is so they use the gate. So they come through the proper means of entrance into this country. Nobody's trying to shut the door on immigration in the United States. They're just trying to make sure that everybody that's coming in has taken the right steps and is a valid person to come into this country and contribute to society. And one of the other things that we're seeing, because of so many things that have happened of late, is that people are now crying out to change American Constitution and policy and broaden it out to either the socialist, or many are, because of the rising Muslim population, wanting to see us under something more like the Sharia law. So, again, here this mentality is manifesting itself in Israel as well, that, hey, we've just got to let everybody in, and, we're all just one people. And this is all, I think, kind of greasing the skids, so to speak, for what's going to happen during the tribulation period. Now, here's another interesting article from Protocol. And again, it's about controlling the flow of information, which if you see any tyrannical government or government system, you can identify what they're all about when you see any mention of state-run media. The government is controlling the narrative, the flow of information to the people. Now, this story is along those lines, and this Protocol magazine says, Internet shutdown, the new authoritarian weapon of choice. Some 850 internet blackouts have been documented in the last decade in countries around the globe. 90% of them, get this, 90% of them in the last 5 years. So it's becoming more popular as a weapon. Over the last decade, governments worldwide have intentionally shut down the internet at least 850 times, with a whopping 90% of those taking place over the last 5 years. What's behind the troubling trend? More people are getting online and getting access to the internet, said Marian Diaz Hernandez, a lawyer in Venezuela and a fellow with the nonprofit Access Now. As governments see this as a threat, they start thinking the internet is something they need to control. These staggering statistics come from a new report released Wednesday by Access Now and Jigsaw, a division of Alphabet that focuses on addressing societal threats with technology. The report documents the history of internet shutdowns over the last decade, the economic toll shutdowns take on countries that impose them, and what governments and the broader business and civil society community can do to stop what has fast become a widespread and grave, this is an interesting phrase, grave human rights violation. So not having the internet now is a human rights violation. Felicia Antonio leads Access Now's Keep It On campaign, which has been documenting internet shutdowns since 2016. Internet shutdowns don't ensure stability or resolve crises that are happening. Antonio said it's actually endangering people's lives. And, there's some validity to that, because I think all of us, our communication, contact with even, emergency services is all taking place through these types of means, whether it be through an email or a text or a call, whatever it is. And if your phone's not working, if you have a Wi-Fi activated phone or whatever, and you can't use it, then emergency services cannot be accessible to you. But again, the point is control the narrative. And this is exactly what's going to happen during the tribulation period. So this feeds right into what we've been talking about. Another interesting story comes from Reuters. And, there are certain things that I don't know, they rile us, I guess, and this will be one of them. So here it comes. Reuters says Pfizer and unions and others donated $61.8 million for Biden's inaugural. $61.8 million. U.S. President Joe Biden raised $61.8 million for his inauguration events, receiving large contributions from corporations, labor unions, and wealthy individuals, according to financial disclosure. The Democratic President's Inaugural Committee took in $1 million in contributions from each of 10 big companies, including Pfizer Incorporated, the maker of one of the COVID-19 vaccines being deployed in the United States, as well as from AT&T Services, Bank of America Corp., and Boeing Corporation. Look at these things, the communication, financial, and travel. Basically, three things that are being controlled and more being controlled and restricted even by this administration. Corporations making $1 million donations also included Uber, Lockheed Martin, again, another more military corporation building fighters and things of that nature, Qualcomm Incorporated, including included to the filing, according to the filing, submitted on Tuesday with the Federal Election Commission. The committee also received $1 million from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, a major labor union. Now, can you imagine that? This is dues money that's being used to throw parties and the like for the president. This money is supposed to go to the workers and those who are injured and those who retire. And the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers is sending $1 million of their union members' money to support the president's celebrations. About a dozen individuals donated $500,000 each, according to the filing, and the filing did not give details on how the money was spent on the events accompanying Biden's January 20 inauguration, which nixed traditional inaugural balls due to the coronavirus pandemic, but included televised performances by Lady Gaga and Garth Brooks. Now, interesting that Trump raised $106 million for his, or the committee raised $106 million for Trump, but Biden exceeded even Barack Obama's expenses on his first inauguration of $53 million. Now, I don't know. I thought maybe there might be a conflict of interest in somebody that's manufacturing a vaccine that the government is purchasing and distributing, making donations to a president's inauguration festivities, but that's just me. Now, Just the News is reporting a lawyer defending 17 alleged Capitol breachers goes missing. John Pierce, the attorney defending 17 clients, charged with storming the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, has gone missing. He missed an August 24th court hearing for one of his clients, and nobody has seen him since. On Wednesday, Pierce's associate told the judge the defense attorney had contracted COVID-19 and was in the hospital on a ventilator. Then also, he said, that he'd actually been in a car accident. And later on, a different associate told the reporter that Pierce was in the hospital being treated for dehydration and exhaustion. And this week, the Justice Department got involved, informing several judges nobody's heard from Pierce in a week, and that multiple phone lines for his law firm seem to have been disconnected. And Pierce's disappearance is endangering the rights of his clients, whose cases have come to a standstill. He also said he would demand information about every officer on duty and throughout the complex that day, the last day that he was seen, and the day of the Capitol riot. So this is Pierce's demand. And subpoena House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and other likely hostile witnesses. So this guy said, I'm calling Pelosi and I'm calling other hostile witnesses in, and now he's disappeared. I'll just leave you with that. Now, here's another consequence of the pandemic and the lockdowns, and this comes from Breitbart. The headline says, UK children being given antidepressants in record numbers, up 22% in the last 5 years. The effects of the pandemic have been blamed for exasperating the mental health problems being faced by children, with the National Health Service, or the NHS, giving a record number of youngsters antidepressants. Figures revealed that last year saw prescriptions for antidepressants written for children aged 5 to 16 rise to 231,791, an increase of 22% over the last numbers from 5 years ago. By age group, prescriptions issued to secondary school pupils aged 11 to 18 had risen by 23% in that same period. Almost as high was the increase of prescriptions to primary school children aged 5 to 11, 5 and 6 years old, needing to take antidepressants. Good grief. The only thing a 5-year-old ought to worry about is what's for lunch or dinner, or can I have a cookie or whatever, ought to be on the mind of a 5-year-old, which was 20%, according to the Times report on Tuesday. The newspaper cited studies and mental health campaigners suggesting that coronavirus lockdowns and the related closure of schools could be increasing mental illness issues on top of other factors already affecting children, such as bullying, school pressure, and bereavement. Todd Matters from the charity Young Minds told the newspaper the pandemic has exacerbated these pressures, with many young people experiencing isolation, loneliness, and worries about the future. Well, what do you think is going to happen when everything that's on the media is get the vax or you're going to die, get the vax or you can't buy, sell, travel, any of those things? What a thing to place on these children who are having trouble processing the whole thing in the first place. Now, we also see that this is a website called Unheard, and Unheard, if you want to look it up, it's UNHERD, not Heard, Heard. And the article says how judges are weaponizing vaccines. Refusing to take a vaccine in America can come at a heavy price. In the land of the free, you can lose access to international travel, your job, your place at a university, and now even your child. This week, a Chicago judge ruled that a mother of an 11-year-old could no longer see her son because she was not vaccinated against COVID-19. According to the mother, Rebecca Furlet, her vaccination status was not raised as an issue by her ex-husband in their child support hearing, but the judge decided that she posed a big enough health risk to her son that no physical contact would be granted, until yesterday when he reversed the decision. Furlet was only allowed to talk to her son on the phone. I talk to him every day, Furlet said. He cries. He misses me. I send him care packages. Notably, Furlet was advised, listen to this now, Furlet was advised not to take the vaccine by her doctor. Listen, Judge, you're not a doctor. Furlet was advised not to take the vaccine by her doctor. I've had adverse reactions to vaccines. And by the way, I received the same counsel from my doctor. Last time I had a flu shot, from my neck to my elbow was fire engine red. I carry an EpiPen. I tend to allergic reactions, and my doctor said, do not get it. Well, I got COVID instead, so I got antibodies the hard way. But Furlet was advised not to take the vaccine by her doctor. I've had an adverse reaction to vaccines in the past and was advised not to get vaccinated again by my doctor. My doctor said it is a risk for you. Well, the judge obviously didn't care and said you can't see your own child because you don't have the vaccine. And this case takes place against the backdrop of vaccines increasingly being utilized and weaponized in the U.S. criminal justice system. In this instance, Furlet was punished by a judge for not having taken the vaccine, but in others, vaccines have been deployed in a way to incentivize or coerce individuals in plea deals. And this marks a new juncture in the intersection between public health and the criminal justice system. At one end of the spectrum, the approach is relatively benign. In Georgia, for example, where vaccination rates are as low as 37%, judges have been cutting community sentences, community service obviously, by half if defendants get a COVID vaccine. These are low-level offenses that do not involve prison time, so the safety risk to the community is low. Elsewhere, however, judges have been inserting vaccines into more serious sentences. Earlier this month, at least 2 judges in Ohio made receiving COVID-19 vaccinations a condition of probation. In one case, a man who pleaded guilty to drugs and firearms offenses was given up to 30 days to get vaccinated or face prison for up to 36 months. Meanwhile, in New York, 2 defendants were ordered in separate trials to get vaccinated as part of a plea deal, according to the New York Times. The judge argued that it fell to him to determine whether a person seeking release represented a danger to their community. The unvaccinated, he wrote, did pose such a danger, given their enhanced risk of infecting others, innocent people, and even potentially causing their death. In the other case, the judge stated that the defendant, accused of drug possession, criminal trespass, shoplifting, and criminal contempt, put his own interest above others. In getting the vaccine, he'd be doing the opposite. And so vaccination would amount to a form of rehabilitation. They've just lost their mind these days. It's just unbelievable what's happening in our world. But Jesus is coming. We're going to be out of here. There'll be none of this nonsense at the marriage supper of the Lamb and beyond. We'll forever be with the Lord in a place where righteousness dwells. Now, the Associated Press is reporting some of the difficult news about Hurricane Ida. We have to include that today. And hundreds of thousands of Louisianians sweltered in the aftermath of Hurricane Ida on Tuesday with no electricity, no tap water, precious little gasoline, and no clear idea of when things might improve. We also have stories about up in New Jersey and New York State. The tropical storm Ida has taken the lives of at least 9 people so far because of flooding. Long lines wrapped around the block, back to our article, formed at a few gas stations that had fuel and generator power to pump it. People cleared rotting food out of refrigerators. Neighbors shared generators and borrowed buckets of swimming pool water to bathe or to flush toilets. We have a lot of work ahead of us, and no one is under the illusion that this is going to be a short process, Governor John Bel Edwards said as the cleanup and rebuilding began across the soggy region in the oppressive late summer heat. I have to say, it's just an incredible thing to see all of the catastrophic results of a hurricane like this, stronger than Katrina, more widespread than Katrina. I was actually in New Orleans 8 days after Katrina hit, and it's just unbelievable to see what these hurricanes do. So we need to be praying for the people in the path of Ida and the aftermath as well. Now, since we're talking about weather-related stories, an anomaly, so to speak, Merrick is reporting that employees help evacuate patients from record flood in China. We see stories that have record or unprecedented in it every week in weather-related issues. Days of torrential rain and flooding created terrifying scenes of submerged roads and vehicles, trapped subway passengers, and overflowing dams and rivers in China's central Henan province and Zhangzhou City. The rain that pounded the area in late July was the heaviest on record in the city. Some reports estimated the city saw nearly 8 inches of rain in 1 hour. amazing. This is interesting, and I think I grabbed this story because right here in Southern California, it rained 2 days ago, or yesterday, actually. And I thought, we have what's called a coastal eddy that moves in. It's a heavy and thick marine layer, and sometimes that'll drizzle, just a thick layer of clouds filled with water, and it just it's almost like a heavy dew that gets things wet, but it really doesn't rain. But yesterday, it rained. It rained it was in August, because it must have been 3 days ago. And because I remember thinking, I was born in Orange County, lived here my whole life, save 18 months where my wife and I lived in Oregon. But this has been my home. Southern California's been my home. California's been my home. I don't ever remember it raining in August, ever. So I looked it up on a couple of different weather websites, almanac type sites, and the driest month of the year in Southern California is August. It never rains in August. The last time they had a reported rainfall was in 1977. So that's pushing 50 years ago, well over 40 at least. So it's kind of interesting to see these types of stories. There's weird and bizarre weather anomalies happening all around the world. And, of course, everybody wants to throw out the climate change thing. And I've said this at conferences before, made people a little nervous. And that is that I believe in climate change, but I just call it by its old name, weather. Things change. We had a couple of ice ages in the history of the world. I mean, the evidence is there and it's clear. So what happened? Where did all the ice go? Well, the weather changed. The climate change is still changing today. It doesn't have to be anything catastrophic that's looming out there. We don't need to panic. God said in Genesis 8:22 that seed time and harvest, the hydrologic cycle is going to continue until he says it's done. So, we need to take care of the planet. Yes, we need to be conscious of those things and watch over our emissions and all that. I mean, that's just good common sense. I remember when I was a kid here in Southern California, we used to have smog alerts. We haven't had one in ages. I can't remember the last time. It does concern me a bit. I wonder if we've just, through our catalytic converters, haven't made the smog invisible, and it's actually still there, but who knows. Another story, same lines, the last of our stories for this evening. This comes from The Watchers, and it's a weather channel. Same type of language. Rare snowfall in South Africa caused by intense cold front. And by the way, when you hear people still touting the global warming thing, actually the Earth is in a cooling trend, and many climatologists have even said we're entering into a mini ice age. The temperature of the Earth is dropping, it's not rising, and of course there's going to be weather changes when that type of things happen, but they seem to be at the extreme, is why I like to point these stories out. It seems like in one area of the world there's an unprecedented drought, like is going on here in California, and then in other areas of the world, there are record rains and floods. And it's not just that it's wet over here and dry over here. It's unprecedented drought. It's unprecedented level of rain. It's rare snowfall, and all these things that we see will reach their culmination during the tribulation period, where the weather anomalies are going to be radical and extreme, including visitors from outside the solar system breaching our atmosphere and crashing to the earth. So, but anyway, just wanted to start today with some good news and reminding us all, in these last days, we need to stand up. There's only one that we bow before. There's only one who we put our knees on the ground for, and that's for Jesus. And listen, when the government starts violating our own rights, we, like Paul, have every right to stand up and say, you know what? I have every right to be on a public sidewalk that I help pay for, to pray for those headed into an abortion clinic, to offer them sound counsel about what's actually inside of them, not to harass them or to annoy them, but I have the same right to walk on that sidewalk or stand on it like anybody else that's going into the clinic. So we need to have our voice heard, because when we stand up, there are results. So with that said, that's the end of the lineup. Please encourage you again. Join us on Telegram. You can find me there by searching my name. Please follow again. Facebook has been restricted, heavily restricted still. I don't know if the election's over. So Why are they still restricting pages? Well, they are. But you can still go there and follow. There's still information posted there. And sign up for our YouTube channel as well. Again, look under my name or simply The Truth About God. So with that, that's it for this week. Praying the Lord bless you and keep you, and that his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you and give you peace. Boy, do we need that peace that passes understanding today. And it's available still through the Lord. Now, last of all, I said it earlier, I'll say it again, I'll say it every week. Keep looking up. Our redemption is nigh. Jesus is coming for his church because he said things would be a mess like they were in Noah's day when it's time for him to return. And hey, I'll see you next Thursday, Lord willing. But please keep us in prayer, myself, Amir, Jack, and Jan, as we have this just incredible opportunity to tell people what's going on in the world and talk about the blessed hope of the glorious appearing of our great God and Savior, Jesus Christ. So that's it for today. Here, there, or in the air. I'll see you.